this is how to stop thinking. The real goal isn't to stop thinking, but it's to get so indifferent to thoughts that they're just like white noise. They're just like background noise. Now, you can actually stop thinking. That's absolute fact. You can stop thinking for as long as you like. Now, the main thing to note is that you probably won't want to stop thinking. That's the main thing, right? We're not here to stop thinking. That's not really the goal. We're here to recognize what is left over when thoughts come to an end, when there is no thinking left. Now, it isn't the fact that there is no thinking that brings about this experience. It's the reason we stop thinking that is important and how we get there. So think of it like this. We need to understand the goal. The goal and the priority for this is to actually understand we're not here to stop thinking. We're not here to try and think. We're here to let the mind gradually come to rest on its own in the nature of our being. You can think of it as like we're letting the mind become so content that it actually disappears. And when the mind disappears, we don't disappear. We're simply left with the silence, which is like the absence of thoughts. Now, the only way that's going to happen is if our mind becomes so accustomed to this almost like emptiness that it starts to experience a peace that is just so beyond any other peace that it doesn't even need to think anymore. Because the reason we realize that we think is actually because we want to get happier. We think that we want to have certain things in life so that we can be happy, so that we can end up having X, Y, and Z. Which then inevitably again is just to be happy. We need to realize that this is the goal. We need to realize that subconsciously, somewhere down the line, we are investing in happiness. That is always what we're trying to do. People have spoke to me and said, like, no, what I want is purpose, or what I want is love. You don't. You may think you want that provisionally, but the reason you want purpose or the reason you want love is because you want supreme contentedness. You want this supreme contentedness that you think you'll have from experiencing that. We have to understand, I've made video upon video and article on this. Happiness is ultimately what we're looking for no matter what. And it's the it's like an unconscious drive. It's the biggest unconscious drive that all people are looking for. Some people more obviously to them than others. So what we're really doing is we're establishing the goal, happiness at all costs. Supreme contentedness, which is happiness for no reason whatsoever. Not happiness because all my affairs are in order and I've got a house and my kids are happy and I've got a great marriage. No, we want happiness that is literally causeless joy. Step 2, we need to understand what is a thought. Okay, if we're going to stop thinking, we need to understand what a thought is. So a thought is like what wind is to the air. Okay, so if we imagine that consciousness is the air, a thought is a motion within consciousness. It's a movement in consciousness. If you want to create wind, you compress air and it moves, basically. You just simply compress air, right? It's a movement of compressed air. If you want to create a thought, you condense consciousness, you compress consciousness, and that movement is consciousness, essentially. It's a movement of consciousness. That's all thinking is. We're not extracting another object out of our brain and it becomes a thought. It's the same as wind is to air. The movement of consciousness is what we call thinking. The next thing is that we need to understand what consciousness is. Consciousness is like the flatline field that contains everything. Consciousness is the only thing that can ever exist and will ever exist. It is existence itself. Existence is self-aware, and that self-awareness, awareness, is consciousness. Awareness and consciousness are the same thing here. Use them in the same way. There is only consciousness or there is only awareness, and that awareness is existence. And this is why we see in the Indian traditions Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, or awareness, existence, consciousness, bliss. Yeah, existence is aware of itself, and the awareness of that is bliss, or what we would call here supreme contentedness or happiness itself. causeless happiness. And the reason for that is because it is the source of everything. So it has no need, it has no desire, it has no meaning. So it means no right and wrong, and it is essentially absolute. So when you see that and you experience it, basically you're at the source of where all joy and happiness come from. Okay? So if you were to imagine a prism is like the mind. Consciousness refracts itself like white light shining through a prism. Like, pretend if you know what a prism looks like, it looks like that kind of like triangle, like you've seen on like a Pink Floyd album. Consciousness shines through the mind, and then it shines into the colors of the rainbow, which is what we call life. So consciousness refracts itself through itself, and that refraction, the prism aspect, is what we call the mind. And what does it do? It shines into the 5 colors of the rainbow that we call life. Life is the 5 senses. Life is literally an experience of you smelling something, tasting something, hearing something, feeling something, or seeing something. There's nothing outside of that. And those senses are all derived from awareness. For example, you could not experience any of these senses if you were not aware. And you couldn't experience any of these things if you didn't have one of these faculties. Likewise with everything. And it's not just a coincidence. It's not like, oh my God, coincidentally, we've evolved in a way that is able to perceive everything that we could possibly experience. No. Simply consciousness is that way. Consciousness has refracted itself to experience everything. And we are that consciousness. Step 3, this is where we learn to turn the horse. Turning the horse is the metaphor for, like, for example, let's just pretend that we were riding a horse and the horse was startled. The horse is just going to run flat out, straight, God knows how long for. So if you want to turn the horse around, we're not just going to yank it to do a U-turn, it'll run faster in that direction. So what we do is we gradually nudge the horse just slightly to one direction. And eventually, even though it's still going forward, eventually it will start to turn. And eventually it will turn around completely. Now, what we're doing here is we're using the mind in the same way. We're using the mind in a way that we can turn the horse. So what we do, and what typically is done, is that we create a sound in the mind. The sound in the mind acts as an anchor. This is what we call mantra meditation. It's the classic Vedic meditation, transcendental meditation. The wisdom behind this is to be able to, instead of focusing on a world of 10,000 things where there's so many distractions, like, think about it, we are accustomed every single day and conditioned to every single object be attractive. Like, think about it, like everything that you can possibly see, at least I hope to some degree, someone has thought, well, how can we make this thing attractive? How can we bring someone's attention to it, right? The lamp you see, the microphone that you see, this like little cup holder, like everything you see is designed to some degree bring your attention to it in some way, whether it's to be pleasant or for some reason unpleasant. Why someone would do that, I don't know. What we're doing is we're just putting that to an end. We're saying, actually, I'm not going to be seduced by every single object that I perceive. I'm going to be seduced by one object instead, and that object is a sound. And we repeat it in the mind. And this is the classic meditation technique. You can also use your breath. I don't care what you do, right? You can do it with a mantra. That was my primary mode. And then I realized that breathing was, for some reason, just more charming to me. And I started to just use the breath instead. It doesn't matter what you use, as long as you're able as long as you're able to just sit down and concentrate. Concentration isn't meditation. What you're doing is you're using concentration and focus to focus on one sound or the breath until eventually it becomes so subtle, so quiet, that it just disappears. And in that disappearance of the thought, there's nothing left apart from pure consciousness. And when you see that and experience it, it's very, very, they call it bliss, but it's not like this ecstatic thing. It's like this pure, supreme contentedness, like this supreme in the sense that it's causeless. It doesn't have a limit. It's not like, oh, I'm happy because of X, Y, and Z. It's like this supreme bliss that is silent, peaceful. It's not ecstatic. It's not excited. It's just peace. It's just pure peace. You don't have zero desire to do anything. You will have a desire because life has to move. So eventually you'll have a desire to move and get up and carry on with your day. The goal is to keep that time where you're spending in that bliss to perpetuate it until that's just the way that you live, until you don't need to go and repeat a mantra every day just to kind of like quiet your mind down to that point. You're just at that point. That's the goal. And that's supreme contentedness. Nothing can take your mind away from that. Nothing's going to stop that focus. Nothing's going to take you away from that. That's yours. That's your own inner lottery ticket to life. There's no greater feat than that. That you've at that stage, there's no greater feat. And that's not to say that you're going to master it. You don't need to master that. It's not something you need to master. I'm not claiming to be a master. I'm claiming to speak from experience, but I'm not claiming to be a master, and I don't care to be a master. No spiritual teacher that you'll see online or any of your spiritual teachers have mastered that. They may get close, but none of them have mastered that. So don't elude yourself, don't delude yourself, don't put anyone on a pedestal. This is fucking basic normal stuff. This is the way life should be. No one should get a reward or a medal or be put on a pedestal for fucking knowing that. Okay? And that's simply it. There's going to be more on this in a new video where I'm going to show you how to actually start thinking from this state, start actually acting from this state. This is where life really gets more enjoyable because you're actually experiencing true peace. You're not supplementing your peace through external objects. So that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and you can get updates on the next videos that come through. So yeah, that'll be it. Thanks. Goodbye.